Welcome to Grave Discussions. I am your host, Barnabas.
And I am your other host, Samael.
Welcome to episode 101, Carving Up a New Legacy. Fiends, we are back. I know it's been a while, but life things happen, and it's just something that we're going to have to get used to, not recording quite as frequently as we did, but we're still here. We're back from beyond the grave, and we're here with a brand new episode. We're going to be talking about two recent high-profile horror movies, taking a deep dive into it. And we are joined by a very special guest who we've had on the show before, but not for a while now. And so we'd like to reintroduce the Caretaker.
Hello.
Hello. A man of many words. So
He's very soft-spoken.
He is. Well, before we dive into the subject, entirely, Caretaker, how are you? What have you been up to?
Well, I'm filmmaking and working. Same old as always. Watching horror movies, watching all the fun, well, somewhat fun remakes and sequels to remakes.
Yeah.
Well, I guess not remakes, but reboots.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to be talking about reboots, remakes, requels, legacy sequels, whatever you guys want to call them, because today we're taking an analytical approach to Scream 5 in particular, but in that same vein, we're going to be discussing some of the other Scream films. And we had you on last time for like a comprehensive look at the whole franchise. But, this time we're going to be prioritizing Scream 5 since it is kind of the new kid on the block. And then we're also going to be taking a little bit of a look in that same respect at the new Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So I'm pretty excited about that. I think, Sam, you're pretty excited about that. I know the Caretaker is excited about that.
Can't wait to get a few things off my chest.
Oh, yeah. Now, I know before we usually get into the trailers and whatnot, we usually give a shout out to Sports Radio Detroit. But unfortunately, I did want to break the news that Sports Radio Detroit has essentially been dissolved now. And so Grave Discussions is kind of operating on its own. But we still want to give a shout out to them this one last time because they really did put us on, and they were our host network, our umbrella for a really long time, for 100 episodes, which is insane. So thank you to Roger Castillo and Sports Radio Detroit for actually giving us the opportunity to get Grave Discussions going. And anything you want to say, Sam?
Yeah, we just wouldn't be here today without them. Like, we had the idea, and Sports Radio Detroit, Rogelio specifically, decided to give us that chance. He believed in us. He said he'd never seen something like this in depth. We met him at like this. It was a restaurant? Was it a Starbucks?
It was
somewhere.
Yeah.
It was a Starbucks. We brought an entire notebook full of ideas, from stupid white people shit to shark jumping to things you shouldn't do, things you should do to survive, tropes, all that stuff. And Roger believed in us. And while we are the fathers of Grave Discussions, Roger is the godfather. So thank you for everything that you've done, Roger. And thank you, Sports Radio Detroit. But now Sports Radio Detroit must, unfortunately, rest in peace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, rest in peace, for sure.
Yes.
A moment of silence. Unless you wanted to say something.
I just like to say really awesome. Sports Radio Detroit. They were great. SRD. RIP.
Yeah. All right. Well, Gravers, we are going to move on, though. And usually we do have the news and trailers, but we're not going to have that for you tonight just because we have so much to cover on this particular topic. So we're actually just going to dive right into it. So I hope you got your snacks or whatever ready, because we're going to dive into the Legacy sequel. So Scream 5. Now, I know we actually talked about Scream 5 for a bit on Grave Discussions last year when it was announced and everything happened. So the first thing I want to ask, without like diving too deep into it just yet, is did it meet your expectations, like from when you learned about it being made? We'll start with Sam. Sure, go ahead.
For me, honestly, first viewing, I loved it. It's been last time a Scream movie got released was 2011, so I had been waiting so patiently for the past 11 damn years.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I'm glad they waited that long and didn't just like spit out one shitty sequel after another, and then Sydney's the main character, and then fucking Dewey gets stabbed for like 100 millionth time, and then Gail gets shot in the fucking chest, and then she pops up like a zombie at the end of the movie from like a pile of rubble. Like, oh, what happened, guys? Like, no, this one was worth the wait. I loved it. It's exactly what I expected it to be, and nothing more, nothing less. Like it hit the mark so much that I went and I watched it a second time just to see if like I still felt the same or if maybe there was like a little bias. And then I watched it the second time and I loved it just as much. And as soon as that 4K release comes out, I'm nabbing that shit.
Yeah, I gotta say, first viewing, I went in and from the opening scene, which I mean, normally the opening scene is, that's big hype in
Yeah.
these movies. And from the opening scene, I was cheesing. I couldn't stop smiling, and I just enjoyed it. It was everything I expected it to be, and more. I I just yeah, I got a lot of good things to say about it. I mean, it doesn't mean that it was a perfect movie, but
Yeah.
there's a lot to talk about.
Nothing really is a perfect movie, which is something that I don't know. I don't want to dig at the social media people too much already, because I understand that we got to maintain that everybody has their own opinion, but I don't know. You come across so many people saying, well, it's not perfect, but like, what movie is perfect? And I think Scream ultimately does a really good job at achieving what it set out to achieve. But yeah, I'll just say briefly, I would say it met my expectations as well, ultimately, overall. And there were certainly parts about it that I wasn't a huge fan of, but I don't think that it was like egregious enough to make me feel like it wasn't a good film or a good Scream entry, even.
100%.
Yeah, so I'm glad all of our expectations were met. I know some people definitely feel the opposite about that, and just because we all agree on that doesn't mean that we don't have differing opinions about some other things, or that this is going to be like a completely biased analysis or anything like that. But we all like it. I like to think it's because we all have pretty good taste, but
Yeah, period. I mean, it was just supposed to be like a meta genre commentary.
Right.
It wasn't supposed to be this, you know, giant like implicit movie with metaphors and stuff like that. It is what the first movie was. It did what the first movie did. It wasn't like the fucking imitators. It wasn't Cherry Falls. It wasn't I Know What You Did Last Summer. It wasn't a bunch of movies trying to cash in on the success of a new style of movie. It is and was Scream 5 was and is what Scream 1 was. Like it's the same thing. Like it's the same thing.
Yeah, it did what the original did in a different way for this new generation. And on top of that, furthermore, I think, the directors, they respected Wes and his legacy in a really great way. And we're going to dive into this a bit more in a bit, but they knew how to make a Scream film and how to honor his legacy with this movie. And they knew what came before it, and they knew that they knew what this movie had to be.
Mm-hmm.
And
100%.
they knew they probably couldn't top Wes Craven at making these movies. I mean, these are top-notch Wes Craven movies, So, but they knew exactly what they had to do, and they definitely executed it.
Yeah. So that's kind of what I want to talk about first. But credit to Matt Bettolini Olpin and Tyler Gillette, the directors, real quick. We just want to tell you guys who they are, but we will go more in depth on their style versus Wes Craven's and everything else. But that's kind of what I wanted to touch on first, is just kind of discussing the movie by itself, and then sort of connecting that, with the first film, and not so much the other films, but even the other films to some degree, but making that connection in particular and discussing that aspect of it. But let's just talk about Scream 5 on its own, right? Because the whole element of it being a legacy sequel is a completely different animal. But let's talk about the movie itself first, okay? As a horror film. So I guess, how do you guys feel like it fits within not only the franchise, but as like a modern horror film? Do you think it do you think it stands out? Do you think it does anything particularly different? Or just talk to me about how you guys feel about it as just like a modern horror film on its own, like without considering the whole legacy aspect of it too much right now.
I think as a modern horror film, I can't really place it in a specific area of like, you know, for example, this would like classify, right? Let's say it's the 1980s. This would be like a teen slasher, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in
Mhm.
modern day, it would still just be, oh, teen slasher. Like that's like, if you're looking at it surface level, like not too like deeply and not thinking too convoluted about it, like it's a teen slasher film. Like it's like a whodunit. And
Yeah.
I think it fits in great to the modern day. I think we need more films that do what it did, because nowadays I think every film tries to be convoluted for the sake of being like pseudo intellectual or pseudo deep, and every movie tries to throw all these damn metaphors and allegories at us to the point where like the movie's like up its own ass so much that like it can like taste its own shit. And like I don't like that. Like sometimes it's okay, like like they were talking about elevated horror in Scream 5, like even touching on what I'm talking about right now, like the Babadook, great movie, right? But when every single movie tries to be some sort of allegory on some sort of human emotion or some sort of like thing that's going on in society, I feel like it kind of like pulls me out of it, because I watch these movies to escape reality. I don't want to fucking, sit down, watch a movie that's talking about like fucking the stock market and like what am I going to do with my life. I don't want a movie to make me reflect on myself. I want to be entertained. And I think Scream 5 did that. Like I said, even surface level, it was an enjoyable movie. Even if you didn't understand the references, even if you didn't agree or see even the message about toxic fandom and all of that, I think it was still like a great whodunit slasher, even without like, all these other things like the references, the callbacks, and all that stuff. As a
Mm-hmm.
standalone movie, I think it did fine. And I don't think I wouldn't say it doesn't fit in with modern day. I just don't think it's up its own ass as far as these artsy fartsy movies are modern day. It did something simple. Occam's razor, right? The simplest solution is usually the true one or the best one, whatever. This movie just Occam's razor the entire Hollywood. And honestly, like, no offense to like all like the independent filmmakers out there, but like, stop making every fucking movie mean something else. Like fucking stop making every movie try to be Hereditary. Stop making every movie try to be Midsummer, try to be Mother. Just do what you do in the category that you're in and do it well, like Scream did. It's not rocket science, this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to answer the question that you asked, essentially, well, first of all, I think it's difficult to differentiate this movie from the first four because it is so similar and it feels right at home. However, if I could put a barrier there, as a standalone movie, I think that I think that it does a really well job. I think like Sam was saying, it's a teen slasher through and through. It doesn't get held up in a lot of the bullshit. It's, straightforward, just a fun teen slasher. Obviously with throwback characters. That's why it's hard to differentiate.
No, I know. Yeah, I feel like that was kind of a difficult question because it is so like attached to the first movie. I don't know if attached is even the right word, but you know what I'm talking about. Like it's difficult to really talk about Scream 5 without talking about the first Scream and hell, even the other Screams. But I think as a movie itself, it is definitely watchable and it's definitely enjoyable, and it does fit that particular, or it scratches that particular itch. When you go to like the movie theater and you want to watch something that is relatively easily understandable and just kind of is fun, like Scream. The difference obviously is that Scream has this meta stuff in it. And right. If you haven't really watched any of the other movies, or if you haven't seen Hereditary or The Babadook or whatever, then, some of the references might kind of go over your head. But at the same time, it kind of still fits that, like, I guess I want to call it the paranormal activity factor, which is like, you go to the movies and you sit there and you watch for the characters and the humor and the twists and that stuff, and not so much to like try and pick apart the message or this like really artistic stuff, which is also fine, but that definitely like addresses a different audience. Like, this is not The Lighthouse, you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. This is completely different. Like those movies, definitely, all respect to some of the, the really good ones, the ones that are done right. But yeah, like he was saying earlier, there's no reason for people to get super cute all the time and have to make these movies. You can make a good movie without having to get cute. Is all.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I mean, even the first Scream operates as a perfectly acceptable movie to watch without having to really like dive deep into the meta commentary. That's more so like a bonus, like if you're watching the first Scream and you understand the references to those like classic slasher movies and stuff that it makes, Friday the 13th, etc., then better for you, right? Kudos. Like, you get a little bonus, right? Like, it's like you, like I ordered some fucking Detroit Wing Company recently, right? For my girlfriend, and I ordered 3 wings, and you know what? She got a 4th wing. Where'd that come from? I don't know. Yeah. But she got an extra wing, right? And it's like, if you understand it's a stupid ass. But anyway, but you know what I'm talking about. Like, if you understand the references, then okay, better for you, right? But it's not like, okay, you're watching The Babadook, and I'm not trying to shit on The Babadook or anything like that. I'm just saying in the context of what we're talking about, if you watch The Babadook, and, at the end, you're left scratching your head because, I don't know, your emotional intelligence or your critical thinking or what have you, or maybe you just don't get it. I don't know. Right. Your film analysis is not on point that day. And you're like, what the fuck just happened? It kind of ruins like your experience with the movie a little bit, which is what people have. But
Or like if a movie like Hereditary, for example, like it's a very atmospheric movie, and if you're pulled out of the atmosphere in any sort of way, you might not connect to that movie in that kind of way. And that's a movie all about connecting to that emotion in the moment and feeling the atmosphere because it's scary if you're actually there. And anyway, getting a little off topic, but essentially, yeah,
I know what you're saying. My whole thing is just like, you can watch Scream and just totally enjoy it and sit there and not really have to like, have your night ruined because you don't know about grief or whatever the fuck.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And like, even with this movie, like, even if you doesn't, what the fuck kind of fucking Walmart talk?
It's okay. Even we're a little rusty.
Even if you didn't catch all like the little meta references, it doesn't take you out of the movie. That's the
No.
thing about these movies. You don't have to have every single piece of the puzzle to have this movie make sense to you.
Mhm.
You see someone's after this person, then they reveal who's after it, and then they reveal why. It doesn't matter if you didn't understand Dylan Minette's little dig at David Arquette's character earlier in the movie and what he's referencing. The movie is still enjoyable, and you still understand why everything unraveled the way that it did. And I feel like there was still enough exposition and character development to like understand that this was a sequel, requel, whatever you want to call it, and there had been movies prior to this, and I felt like it was explained well enough for you to know exactly in the timeline where we are in this movie had you not even seen the other movies, and that's what I enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that kind of leads into a good question that I wasn't originally going to ask, but with these films, right? Because their whole idea is to essentially retcon the rest of the fucking franchise and really only focus on the first film, right? Halloween did it, Texas Chainsaw, even Candyman, pretty much to an extent, right? To an extent. With those movies, you pretty much have to watch here's the thing. I don't know actually, because like Halloween, I feel like you could probably watch David Gordon Green's Halloween. You could probably watch that one without having seen the first one, and like, yeah, it might be a little weird, but I feel like you could. I don't know. Do you guys agree? And like maybe Texas
feel
Chainsaw to some degree.
Texas Chainsaw, I feel yes as well. I mean, because what you understand from Texas Chainsaw is like this woman escaped this crazy guy. The guy disappeared for all these years, and now this woman is a sheriff, and she's been looking for him. Just like in Halloween, you can understand this woman, 4 of her friends were brutally murdered. She made it out alive, and now she's a hermit, and she has all these issues. I think there doesn't have to be a deep dive into every specific thing in the person's past to have a very broad understanding of where they are now and why they are the way that they are and everything that's going on. I feel like it doesn't have to be explained to death, because I feel like when there's too much exposition and everything's explained to death, I feel like it's insulting to the viewer. Or, I mean, there are some stupid people out there. There could be like a ton of exposition and explaining, and then they'll be like, "Yeah, I still don't get this. There's like 12 other movies. Where'd this one at? Like, where'd this one take place?" Like, you know, because you see Facebook groups that'll be like, "Well, what happened to Jamie Lee Curtis's daughter?" Like, you know what I mean? So, like, this, I don't know. I feel like these movies aren't for those people. I feel like these movies are for the hardcore fans that can like place them, but they can also be for like the fans with like a shred of intelligence and can like understand what happened and where this takes place and why everything is the way that it is. And that's why, like, I'm now jumping too far ahead. That's why I think Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Scream like don't have to be explained to death for the new movies to be able to be enjoyed, and not only enjoyed, understood at like a very basic level, because you only have to understand these things at a basic level, like I said, to understand why we're at where we're at. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. I think that you don't have to, like, it for the new generation, for the new Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the new Scream. You don't need the new generation doesn't need a lot of exposition, a lot of background. These movies pick up; they're enjoyable. You can watch them without having seen the other ones, because they essentially kind of give you the backstory a little bit within them. At least in the first ones, like Halloween. Obviously, if you saw Halloween Kills, that picks up right after Halloween. However, you do get a lot more out of these films if you have seen the legacy movies, the originals. Just like you said, these movies really are more so for the hardcore fans than they are for the new generation of people, or just like people who peek in and watch a movie here or there. So, you know, they work for both, but they're better for their hardcore fans.
Yeah, I can see that to some degree, but I'm personally kind of on the fence to say I agree about like Texas Chainsaw and Halloween to some degree. Candyman's a little bit more iffy because I feel like that movie relies quite a bit more on the sequel, or not the sequel. I feel like that movie relies quite a bit more on the original like narrative, to where if you kind of don't watch the original, I don't know, like I feel like it just won't make as much sense as to like why this is happening to this guy, and why the gentrification of the neighborhood matters quite as much and everything like that, you know? Like sure
Yeah.
you could still watch it, but and honestly, I kind of feel like Scream is even more like that to like a higher degree. So for me personally, like I'll agree to some respect. Like, yeah, you could probably watch the new Scream and still enjoy it because, you know, at the end of the day, it's like a whodunit movie and you'll enjoy the twist and like figuring out who the killers are and everything. But I feel like this movie, due to like what it tries to do in the meta aspect of it, like being a legacy sequel, but also talking about the legacy sequel, I feel like if you don't watch the first Scream, like you're at a serious disadvantage. I don't know. Maybe that's just my takeaway from it, but
No, I mean, I'll say
understand.
this. So for the new Scream, it definitely like, so if you're asking a question like, is the movie more enjoyable if you see the new one first and then you go back and watch the old ones? Or is it better if you watch the old ones first and then you watch the new one? And for Scream, definitely you get way more out of it because it connects to the older ones in a really deeper way. And we're going to get into that. But for a movie like Halloween, it does connect in a deep way because of the characters. Laurie Strode, obviously. But I don't know if it does it to the degree that Scream does, because it is rooted in a different kind of a way.
yeah, I guess that's
So
what
I
was
understand
talking
that with
about.
Scream.
I feel like Halloween tries. Like that's
Yeah.
that's the thing with Halloween. Like it tries with Scream.
That should
I
be the
just feel
title
like
for the next
it-
one.
What, Halloween tries?
Halloween tries
Honestly,
instead of Halloween ends.
after kills.
Yeah, right. Oh god, that was a fucking nightmare. But like, I feel like Halloween tries. Halloween tries to make everything like flow naturally and be like, yeah, you know, you don't have to see the original, you know, to feel out this one and to like understand it and enjoy it. Whereas Scream, I felt like it was a lot easier to be able to enjoy the movie had you not seen the previous entries. And like the Caretaker said, you can always look back at the previous entries. Sure, it might not be as enjoyable, but like I also agree with what Barnabas said. I think you are missing out had you not seen the previous entries or the original, but you could at least at the minimum you can go to the movie theater, watch this movie, understand it, and enjoy it. But you would understand it and enjoy it a lot more had you seen the original. So it doesn't take away from the enjoyability of it or like what you can understand about it and understand about the characters. But I feel like it's just you can take in a lot more and understand a lot more than just surface level explanation. Like the fifth one, you can understand it more had you seen the movie, because you know Billy Loomis when you see him in the flashbacks. You know what those wounds are from. You know why he's saying what he's saying. You recognize his voice. You understand the characters. You can like literally picture like, oh, you know, my mom was sleeping with Billy Loomis, and you can imagine Billy Loomis running around cheating on Sydney. There's a lot of things that you get a lot more if you're a hardcore fan, but if you're just a casual watcher, I don't think it takes a lot away. But I do think had you watched the original, you would be a hardcore fan going into this. So for everyone who has seen Scream 5 and it's the only entry you have seen, go back and watch the rest of them, because yeah, you might have enjoyed it as a standalone, but you 100% will enjoy it a lot more going through the entire timeline of events leading up to this movie.
Yeah. No, I do agree. I mean, I'm not trying to say that it's like unwatchable if you haven't seen the first movie, but I do
It's
think
just not as enjoyable
Yeah.
had you not seen the previous. Because I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we've done that with some movies. Like I've I've seen sequels to some horror movies before I saw the original. So like let's say Friday the 13th, for example. I know
Hmm.
damn well none of us watched the first Friday the 13th
No.
first, where Jason's mom was killing people.
No.
We either saw like fucking part 3, part 4, Jason Takes Manhattan. Those were
Right.
one of our first ones.
Yeah.
And then, you go back, you watch it from the beginning, and you're like, oh, this all fits into play. But you still can enjoy it. But now you have that deeper knowledge, and like every little thing, like the mark on the corner of Jason's mask where the axe hit him in part
Hmm.
3, you
Mm-hmm.
understand why he has that mark. And like it's just little things, but I feel like those little things are like
They make the
a
movie
part
better,
of,
the
yeah,
little
they make the movie
details.
better. And
They're little things that can make the movie more enjoyable. I mean, we've been using that word a lot, but it's true.
little
It can
things
make
like
the
you see as a
experience
hardcore
better.
fan, you'd be like, oh shit, that's that. Like it's
Mhm.
like a little like fucking like, oh, it's like a eureka moment while you're watching it. So
Yeah.
like, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's the enjoyable thing about these movies to me. Like, I don't know. I don't know anyone who just went to go see Scream 5 and was just like, yeah, it's my first time into this fucking series. I was like, damn, what are you doing? You had months to prepare for this.
Yeah, I know.
Mm-hmm.
I guess my whole thing, and I'll use this as kind of a segue into really the point, which is, the legacy sequel thing is saying that in my brain I was thinking like, yeah, Halloween is it's just more of a story, right? Like if you haven't
Mm-hmm.
seen Carpenter's film, you could go into David Gordon Green's and watch it and kind of get the gist of it. Like, oh, here's Michael Myers, and okay, Laurie Strode was his babysitter as a kid, and boom, boom, boom. Here's some new characters. Here's some more annoying teenagers for him to kill, and he's going around slaughtering people, right? With Scream, it's a little bit different because of just the very nature of Scream, which I kind of wanted to rant about earlier with people, and it's like I feel like some people don't like get what Scream is, right? Like we're talking about like the question that I asked is relevant, and I'm talking about it like, yes, you can technically like go to the theater and watch it as a standalone movie, and it's a slasher who done it, and that's all cool, right? Well and good. But at the same time, though, it still is a commentary on horror, on slashers, right? You go see Wes Craven's original film in theaters and you watch it and you're like, oh, this is cool. But if you've seen all those other movies, it's really a completely different thing. And I mean, at the end of the day, the writers of Scream and the way Wes Craven directed it was to kind of highlight those things, right? I mean, you got all the slasher movie rules, you got just the actual way that like the scenes are laid out and how things unravel and everything, and those are all kind of they're very Scream things because it did revolutionize, I feel like, a lot of that stuff, but they're also comments on horror and slasher movies, right? And this movie is very much the same type of thing where yes, it is a narrative, and yes, it does have those whodunit aspects, and you could totally watch it, but it's a legacy sequel, and that is like such a highlight of the actual film, to the point where if you haven't seen the original, I don't know, I just feel like it's not unwatchable, but it's harder to be as invested as opposed to like Halloween or something, because it's like you have Dewey, Sidney, and Gale in here, and with Billy popping up, like there's just so much more to actually understand, I feel like, and look back on in Scream 5. So let's get really into how it operates as both a legacy sequel itself, and this is also, I feel like, what kind of differentiates it, because it's a legacy sequel in itself, and it's also a commentary on that whole trend, which is why it's so unique, I feel like, in this, modern wave of requels or whatever the fuck you want to call them. So how exactly does it operate in both respects, and does it do it well? Does it not do it well? Could it do that better, or what? Because much in the same vein as Craven's original Scream was what was a slasher, it was also a commentary on slashers. And, now we look back on it and we think it did it perfectly. Right. I mean, some of us do, right? We think it did. So does Scream
Definitely.
5 do that with its whole take on the Legacy sequel?
I mean, I think so. I mean, it touches on so as a slasher, like I already said, it does great as a slasher. As a whole meta commentary about the specific thing it's talking about, in this case, like toxic fandom, and on top of it, I mean, honestly, it's I kind of agree with the villains in this one. Like, you remember their problem was all these crappy sequels, and how many since day one of Grave Discussion, since the birth of this Undead podcast, have we been talking about shark jumping? All these unnecessary sequels that make the fans fucking cringe. But also, you can't be that shitty fan that's all fucking hipster-esque and fucking this fucking sucks, this fucking bullshit, this fucking this fucking that. And that's what Richie and Amber kind of were. And I think the fact that you get where they're coming from, but also hey, don't be psycho and take it to that level, and yeah, let's fucking create a new fucking movie that's gonna be fucking good. But then that's just also subjective to your taste and what you want for it, just because that's the thing. They thought that since we're hardcore fans, right, we're gonna make this fucking movie, and this, because we're the hardcore fans and only what we fucking care about matters, since that's what we want, this is gonna make a good fucking movie. And like Gail said, fuck them, let them get lost in anonymity. But I don't know, I feel as the whole meta thing in this one, like I said, slasher did fine. The whole meta thing in this one was, I mean, the other movies touched on it too. Movies don't create psychos, movies make psychos more creative. And this one, it's movies don't create psychos, shitty movie sequels make psychos want to make better movies. You know what I mean? This one was, the movies create the psychos that want to keep the good movies going, and the shark jumpers to fucking stop, which I get. But also then they're kind of being hypocritical because they want the trajectory of the series to go in the direction that they want it, and they have that weird entitlement that because they want it to go in this certain direction, that this would be the best thing for the series. So it's that's the toxic part of it, the whole narcissistic I know what's best. And I mean, come on, you didn't think they would benefit from it? They're talking about all this monetary shit, oh, they're just doing these sequels for money and da 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 da. You literally wanted to end up being the survivors of this brutal bloodbath and get your own notoriety and then have your own movie made about you. So is it really you care for the genre, or do you want to be the person known as reinvigorating this series in this genre of film? So I don't know, I felt like the movie did it great. That answers that. That's what I meant with my whole rant, is that that's how in-depth the movie is. Without it saying as much as I did. It said much less than I did, but it still got the message through. And that's why I think it's a good movie. Because I just explained it for 3 straight minutes, and that movie kind of touched base here and there.
Yeah,
and
it just
said the exact same thing.
It says those things, but when it says it loud and clear. It even touched on, like you said, shitty movie sequels, just keep going and just keep going. It even touches on that, obviously, with the movie within a movie, the Stab series, and obviously with the shitty sequels, just like you were saying. So I think that the commentary that it had in this movie was great for what it was trying to say. I think it said it nicely, and from a slasher aspect, I think it did it really well as well.
Yeah, because I mean the formula is very similar to the first movie, which is the whole point of the Legacy sequel thing.
Yeah, it keeps a lot of the. I mean, Sam touched on a lot of it already, but the movies don't create psychos. Movies make psychos more creative. It exactly made these psychos more creative because they wanted to make these movies. They wanted to make these sequels based on real life events, and they were willing to do commit these murders, Richie and Amber, for that. So
I do think it's interesting that this movie is really the first. I mean, because four did kind of touch on the whole like tech aspect, but this is the first Scream to really address the fan base, right, and the horror audience and everything like directly. So I mean, that's really breaking the fourth wall.
yeah,
But-
I mean, tons of comments on toxic fandom, and obviously other movies such as Star Wars.
Yeah, it's true. Which is really relevant because it could have very easily left all that stuff out and only really just touched on the legacy sequel thing, which in and of itself is an entire topic that can be talked about. I mean, but that's exactly the reason why the fans are relevant, because you have Halloween and TCM and Candyman and those movies coming out. And I mean, they're just getting fucking blown up on social media, right, by fans. And you got fans coming on going, oh, well, I would have done this and I could have made a better movie and blah, blah, blah. And that's exactly why Richie and Amber exist. That's why they did what they did. So, I mean, it definitely blends that.
It was birthed it was birthed into this new generation for this new wave of audience.
Exactly, yeah. And because so many people like dislike a lot of the sequels and everything and want, a continuation of the first movie, because it's always the first movie. I mean, not every franchise, right? Because we know that there are most, but I mean, I prefer like quite a few of the Friday the 13th sequels to the original. Not to say that the original isn't a good film, but I do. And I'm sure some people, maybe psychos, I don't know, but some people probably prefer some of the Halloween sequels to to the original. I know Samael loves Halloween 5. I mean, in comparison to Halloween, so
yeah.
But some of that could, I think a lot of those things can, nostalgia factor. Obviously takes over. That's exactly what that is. So it's based in. I mean, it's all based in. It's all subjective. But,
yeah, exactly.
But yeah.
But it's the whole thing of like, a lot of people love the first movie so much that, okay, why don't we make this movie continuation of that movie, and then maybe the fans won't bitch about it, but they do anyway. So this movie still touches on that whole aspect. But as a legacy sequel itself, I mean, I still think it works well. The thing is, though, like it's barely a legacy sequel because they still mention the events of Scream 4 to some degree. And I think maybe you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. They don't really mention that much else about like 2 and 3, but I think there might be like a very subtle reference here and there, or maybe at one point, I don't know, about how, it's like happened before, although I can't remember exactly. So I don't know if they maybe don't even really get into like 2 and 3, but
First one, yeah.
But there was that whole line I think Richie said in the car with what's her name? You know what I'm talking about. But
Sam?
Yeah, as they were driving to Woodsboro, like, like the events in 2011 or whatever. And that was really it. But as a legacy sequel to the first movie itself, I mean, I still think it operates completely fine. And in a way, I mean, really does kind of operate like those other legacy sequels, like Halloween and whatnot, because it does continue. Like I said, though, it's really just the whole meta commentary aspect that really separates it. But I mean, as a legacy sequel, do you think it works well, and does it work better than those, or does it work worse than those? Because there are definitely a lot of things we can pick apart, I'm sure, with how it's actually laid out.
I think it works better, but I mean, because look at one. One was like a little. So like the whole even point of Scream was being like this sort of like meta commentary on the genre and all that stuff. Because like slasher movies were dying. Like the 90s, we had like fucking The Faculty. We had Halloween H2O. We had all this crap coming out. Halloween H2O after Scream, but we had Hollywood was essentially running out of ideas, and they're like, how do we revamp this? And they're like, oh, Scream, let's do a meta commentary of the genre. And I was like, okay, cool. But then it seemed like by the time the sequels came out, they forgot the entire point of Scream and just made it, oh, Ghost Man going after girl with brown hair who's, who keeps getting chased by these ghost faces. Like, and there was really not that much of a meta commentary. It was very minor. Like in the sequels, they'd be like, there are rules to surviving the sequel. There are rules to a trilogy. It was super meta, but like not like the original. So I mean they touched base on like some of the genre rules and stuff like that, and like you got to shoot him in the head, the killer's like superhuman, when fucking Roman didn't die, and then he just got up and he just started run. They're like, in the head, Dewey, shoot him in the head. And then you can see Dewey learns his lesson by part 5, and he's like, I gotta go shoot her in the head, guys, sorry. And he fucking leaves him on the elevator. Like, so I don't know, part 4 was like kind of like, I don't know, I feel like part 4 was like one of the least meta ones. Part 4 was kind of like, it was still geared toward horror, but more like the whole like, because found footage was blowing up, the internet was blowing up in 2011. So 4 touched a lot of base on like the cameras and like the audience, and I don't need friends, I need fans. Like, how am I going to become famous unless I'm the survivor of this bloodbath? And like, it wasn't really about the horror genre in part 4. I wouldn't say. It was more about like getting famous, like, because that was Jill's whole angle, right? It wasn't about the horror genre. It wasn't like Richie and Amber. All she gave a fuck about was like being a survivor and like making all this money and the fame and the notoriety and the money. That's all it was in that one. So I feel like the first 3, they were pretty meta. Part 4 was like kinda, and then part 5 was like, yep, we're back to the roots.
Yeah, definitely. I think the first 3 were all very meta in their own ways. I think 4 was even, meta, but like you said, maybe not to the same degree. It really touched on the stab movies a lot more in Scream 4. Obviously, this movie followed it up with, this movie really followed, like you said, every movie was made for its time and its generation, even though the first 3 came out within 5 years of each other. Was it 5 years, 4 years, something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
So obviously those movies were all made pretty tightly together, so the culture hadn't changed a lot much, or a lot much. The culture hadn't changed much up to that point. But when 10 years passes, or actually, I guess it'd be 11, because I think Scream 3 came out in 2000, so 11 years to 2011, and then another 11 years to Scream 5. Culture changes, pop culture changes a lot, and the world changes a lot, so your meta references are going to be completely different.
Right, exactly.
So you can do a lot more when you space your movies out more. So my big question is, how is Scream 6 going to play on that? Is it going to, is the meta stuff going to start getting stale? At what point? Like, what are they going to be able to do that's going to be more meta than the first, obviously it's the sequel to which, that could be the title, Scream, the sequel.
Yeah, really. Yeah.
But just because it's, a meta thing, and, they might not want to go with the whole numbers thing, because technically this is Scream 5, and then if they go with Scream 2 or something, it's,
Yeah, they can't call it Scream 2, because every basement dweller is already going like, why do they call it Scream? Not 5 Cream or Scream 5 or whatever.
Right, 5 Cream. 5 Cream.
I mean, they could go with Screams.
Yeah, but that's the thing.
Screams, but
people
then
don't
that
get
changes.
it,
Then that changes the like. I don't know if I'm a big fan of Screams, because making it plural makes it.
Yeah, because then it'll be Screams, and then
it just makes it feel like a completely different.
And then
movie.
Screams, and then more Screams.
Screamers.
I don't think it would make sense for that. Although there is a history of although there is a history of the pluralization, actually mattering with aliens and predators, but I feel like unless you're in the alien and predator world, it doesn't make any fucking sense. So Screams wouldn't work, but whatever the title is, it would have to pretty much revolve around legacy sequels, which I don't know. That's a whole other discussion, I feel like, but that's kind of the natural progression at this point because, like I said, Scream is very much a kind of a time sensitive concept, right?
Yeah.
If nothing's going on, it's very trend reliant.
Yeah.
And if nothing's really happening, then it's like, okay, what do you do? And that's precisely why the whole time gap worked out.
Yeah, that's why it works out for these movies. And, that's why, I mean, at least in my personal opinion, obviously, the first is the best.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy the second one a lot, but, it's just not nearly as good. Scream 3, obviously, that fell off a little bit, but, it had its reasons. It had some excuses. But, they were all released within 4 years of each other. And there wasn't, you start growing stale when you release your movies so quickly. Because you're talking about essentially the same thing over and over and over, but you're just kind of finding different ways to say it. Or, like Scream 2 talked about the sequels. That's what obviously this next Scream 6 is going to be about. It's going to talk about the sequels, but the sequels to... the legacy sequels or the
and I think it's
requels.
probably going to be more about like creating its own story and not following tropes, because like when's the last time we saw like a legacy sequel? It had to be with Halloween Kills, and that one was trash. So if they're prepared to take digs on that, I'm excited.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think they. I mean, I don't know how many digs they'll take directly at that, but I'm sure they're gonna reference it.
I hope they say Evil dies tomorrow.
Movies. Oh my god!
Oh, dude!
Stop it. Evil dies eventually.
Evil dies in a fortnight.
There's a Halloween Kills fan in the movie. He's like a big time fan.
He loves
Halloween Kills, and that's like his favorite movie. and he says Evil dies tomorrow.
He has to be revealed at the end, because then you'd want to kill him instead, like immediately.
We've done
maybe he's the killer.
Halloween and Scream movies before, and we've done people watching Scream and Halloween movies in Halloween H2O. So might as well go for it again. Be ultra meta.
Yeah, why not? That's the whole point. But yeah, I mean, as a legacy sequel, regardless, I definitely think it works because it is so closely tied to the original. And with Scream and now Scream, you're talking about the whole time gap. I mean, the length of time between those two films in particular is obviously the longest in the franchise, but it's let me count on my fingers here, 14. I don't know. It's like 25, 26 years. So, I mean, that's insane. And considering this movie it's not like a shot by shot, but a lot of the same stuff kind of happens, like the structure of the story at least in some things is similar, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they go to Stu's house at the end of the film, and a lot of that plays out very similarly. And then, of course, I mean, the beginning and the middle of the film, not quite as much, but it still kind of follows that similar type of structure. But with Wes Craven's, I mean, it's 1996 versus this 2022 technically. And it's very much different in like the technology they have on display, right? Have fucking rotary phones everywhere, and you have normal cars and stuff and everything like that. So it is different, but it still does its own thing, and it has new killers, and it has this completely different motive and everything. So
yeah,
to that degree, I do think it works. And actually, in respects to like the legacy characters, I think it works to some degree, but that's where I start having some issues with the movie, and where I think it might not work quite as much as maybe some of the other legacy sequels, although I don't know. I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts on it, but yeah, from a writing standpoint, in terms of like the story and how it approaches the commentary, which we've talked about for a while now, I think it works. But let's talk about some of those specific elements, which really is the characters themselves.
Well, I will say that I appreciate, I mean, all the movies have an advancement in technology within the movies, obviously to go with the flow of time, but also to advance, Ghostface throughout the series. Even this one did it, and I appreciate that they did that in this one. They gave him the voice changer inside of his mask, and that was really unique to see, because Ghostface has evolved in every movie in his own ways. His character development, honestly, like Ghostface himself, aside from the characters who are Ghostface himself has evolved throughout time with technology and had these new little gadgets and toys, like the voice changer in 3, who he could sound like, whoever he wanted to sound like, and he could sound like Ghostface. And so I appreciated this movie from that front, first and foremost. But to dive into the legacy characters and how they were handled in this film, so I will say, from one character's perspective, I enjoyed all the characters in this movie, as I always do. However, I do think that, a couple of them necessarily really have to be in the movie much, if at all. But they were in Sydney and Gale.
Yeah.
But Dewey, he was paramount to the story. I thought, and I thought that they wrote his character really well, and I thought that he played it really well. Obviously, it didn't work out so great for him.
We could probably have. I mean, we've been kind of spoiling things anyway,
Right.
so I think this is fine if it's like a spoilerific.
Yeah. So
episode.
yeah, obviously we know what happened to Dewey. R.I.P.
Yeah.
Very sad to see him go, but he did kind of have the most badass death in the entire
He got fucking
Scream
gutted.
franchise, kind of.
Not only he.
Yeah, he got
not
fucked
only did he
up,
get
like,
gutted,
big
like
time.
she stabbed him in his spine and pulled the knife up his spine, and then the knife that was in his stomach, she pulled it all the way up to his chest. So she like fucking gutted him and like fucking gutted his spine, if that makes fucking sense.
Yeah. She like ensured that he was dead. Like there was no possible way. It was like, Dewey's been stabbed. You don't just stab Dewey. And she knew that. She was like, no, you don't just stab him. You fucking gut him on the spot. Otherwise he's going to fucking live. Mm-hmm. He's going to come back and shoot you in the head.
Yeah, he tried. He did try, but
he did try to come back and shoot her in the head, but he wasn't fully prepared.
No.
I that's the important thing about the legacy characters, though. I feel like they were important to bring back to add to the tension of the movie, and the tension didn't get like super like aggravated until Dewey's death, because when you kill a legacy character and you have to kill one of them, that lets the audience know the stakes are raised and nobody is off limits.
Yes.
And it's not like Randy dying in the second one, because he wasn't just in one. Dewey was in all of them. He survived a whole bunch of shit. So was Gale, so was Sydney. So we had to have one of them die to raise the stakes and let people know, like, hey man, like somebody else might go too. You never know. You have to be on your toes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I respected it for that, big time. But to touch on Sydney and Gale, I mean, yeah, they needed to be in the movie because Dewey was in the movie, and if Dewey's in the movie, they should be in the movie. So it makes sense. But to some degree, their characters weren't necessarily really paramount to the story as Dewey's was. It was just kind of like they were, it was fine that they were side characters, but some of their dialogue, the way that their characters were written, felt a little bit off. But
yeah, I agree. I mean, that was one of my biggest gripes with this one, and I think between the three of us, I mean, I know I've probably talked to both of you individually about it and kind of said along the lines of the same things, but Dewey was absolutely instrumental to the film, and I think he was the best handled of the legacy characters for sure. And his inclusion and his death made total sense, and especially because, like you said, he's been in 5 movies now, so killing somebody was the right thing to do, and his death made the most sense. But Gale was really just there for Dewey. And Sydney was only really there to pass the torch onto Sam, which, I mean, I guess theoretically she kind of did because Sam survived and was made out to be the final girl. I don't know if she really like passed the torch on to her, because we don't really see that much interaction between her and Sam.
Yeah, there's not
But not like
a
in
ton.
a very meaningful way.
No, not much. Just a couple moments before the end scene. Actually, no, just one moment before the end scene, and then basically the end scene happens. They're together in the house and they get attacked, and they both survive, and then they have the interaction right at the end. At the back of the ambulance when Sydney's sitting there. And I mean, that's essentially the moment that Sydney passes the torch.
Yeah.
When Sam was like, "Will I be okay?"
Yeah.
And then they were like, "Eventually."
Yep. Eventually.
After 3 movies.
Meaning a lot of different things.
Yeah. But I mean, to some degree though, like I was kind of alluding to, we talked about how after Dewey's death, I mean, it's like, are you really going to kill another legacy character? And so it kind of felt like they were definitely protected, and so their actions kind of in that whole third act pretty much were kind of like
they were invincible in a way. It felt like
not totally useless, because it's like, okay, we get that it's a legacy sequel, it's an homage pretty much to the first movie, so okay, Sydney and Gale kind of have to be there, but at the same time, like, it kind of felt like they didn't really have to be there either, because it almost would have been potentially more impactful if it was just the new cast. I don't know. I guess that can be debated, but just kind of the way that they were handled throughout the whole movie, aside from Dewey, was a little questionable, I guess, in my opinion. Like, they were there just to exist, almost, but that's them, and I don't know.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say that they were there just to exist. I mean, if Dewey's in the movie, he's connected to them and rooted to them. So I think if Dewey's in the movie, you have to have Sydney and Gale be a part of the story. They're a part of his story. So obviously, if Ghostface is back, they're going to have that connection.
Mm-hmm. But Dewey,
so in that kind of way, they are necessary. But from a writing standpoint, I do agree. I think that their characters felt a little bit off. Like, they were just existing inside of the script. They were necessary to Dewey, but they were just existing inside of the script.
It felt like Sydney and Gale were protected, and they knew they were protected. Yeah. Even that's my one gripe with this film. Like, their nonchalantness made me feel like they knew that nothing would happen to them, even though the stakes were supposed to be raised because one of the legacy characters died. That was my qualm with the movie.
Right? Yeah, they still felt invincible even after Dewey got gutted. Yeah. And they went into the house and they were like, you ready for this? What was the line she said? She said,
"For this, never."
For this, never. But it's just kind of like cheesy lines like that. And the cheesy lines when they're in the kitchen with Amber, with Mikey Madison's character. They just felt invincible. Yeah. And it kind of disconnected them from the story a lot.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
And the grounded realism that they're going for, especially like, killing a legacy character like Dewey, really it makes the movie more grounded in reality, because it's like, anything can happen. All bets are off when a legacy character dies.
Yeah.
So their characters were just handled a little bit wrong. If all bets were off, their characters should have been in danger a little bit more, or at least felt in danger, because they didn't feel like they were ever in danger. It was just like, they're definitely going to survive. It's Gale and Sydney. Like, there's like, even though Dewey got gutted, like, you had no feeling that they were ever in any danger.
See, I feel like Dewey was Dewey in this movie, right? But Gale and Sydney were Dewey's Gale and Dewey's Sydney, if that makes any fucking sense. It's like, without Dewey, they were like we're kind of all saying, they were there, right? But there wasn't really any total danger.
Dewey was
because
like the connecting factor, and
yeah,
the fact that he was gone, and we were left with Sydney and Gale, and they were, like you said, Dewey, Sydney, and Gale. It kind of left the characters sort of hollow.
yeah, to some degree. Because in the other films, I mean, they were, even with the new cast, they were still the main characters, and so they all kind of had their own importance to them, right? In this one, it felt like they took definitely a backseat to the new cast, which is the point of being a legacy sequel and, continuing with a new generation and everything. But still, I mean, after his death, they just felt less important and like they didn't need to be there.
I think the problem is they weren't developed enough, and it's been 11 years. So, like, the fact that the directors were like, we don't need to develop these characters. It's Sydney and Gale. Yeah, but it's Sydney and Gale 11 years later, and I feel like they hadn't been developed to the point where they seemed indifferent the whole time.
Yeah.
I think that's what the problem was.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the one other primary legacy character who does show up in the movie, but in a much different way, which is Billy Loomis. So I think some people also had potentially some issues with how Billy was portrayed in the movie, and I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts on that.
Well, for me, so I've seen the movie twice, and upon first viewing, I definitely when I first saw him the first time he popped up on screen, I was kind of thrown off. It felt weird, and I wasn't really sure about it. As the movie carried on, I wasn't a big fan of it upon first viewing, to be honest. I just kind of felt like it was unnecessary. It didn't really need to be there. She could have still been connected to him. But at the same time, I know they really wanted to express the emotional connection that she has to him for some reason. Why it's so deeply rooted inside of her. And by showing his character in these episodes that she has, talking to him, it's one way to do that. And I think even some of the segments with him could have even been done a little bit better. But upon second viewing, I still think some of the segments could have been done a little bit better, but I didn't think it was as cringy as I thought it was the first time I saw it. So that's kind of how I felt about it. Billy Loomis himself, he looked good.
Yeah.
He looked like Billy Loomis.
I mean,
the CGI was, you could kind of tell in moments, but it wasn't terrible. It didn't take me out of it.
No, I could tell it was adult Skeet Ulrich, but digitally aged a little bit. It wasn't too crazy, but it did throw me off the first time.
Right.
And probably in that one scene where she sees him in the rear view mirror, it was better because you don't really see all of him.
Yeah.
But there were some parts where I was like, it was almost like they were doing the Paul Walker thing, but fucking God. Skeet Ulrich isn't dead. So
it's so weird. I feel like I was looking at I felt like I was looking at a 49-year-old, 17-year-old. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. He looked good, but at the same time,
Yeah.
He just
aside from that,
it didn't take me out of it too much, though.
No, go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, aside from the aesthetic, it did kind of throw me off, but then I was like, yeah, they did the best they could. I'm not gonna fucking nitpick the aesthetics of it, but I felt like he was necessary to show us how bad Sam's psychosis was. And I don't know if the hallucinations were to make her a red herring. I feel like they weren't, because the hallucinations were telling her to dwell in her psychopathic tendencies and not fucking fight them. So that kind of told me itself that she hadn't killed anybody, even though her dad hallucination was telling her she shouldn't fight those feelings and she should just go for it. And then on the other hand, I'm like, well, it is like a fucking Scream movies are always filled with twists, so you never fucking know. Why would she attack her sister? Oh no, but then she got attacked. Well, what if she never got attacked because like they never found anyone? They never found like this and that. So like it kind of made you question stuff, but I think the point of it was to like I don't know. I think the point of it was to have you question things about the next entry, if there would be one.
Yeah.
Would Sydney be handing Sam the final girl torch, or would Billy be handing her the serial killer torch?
That is an interesting thing to think about, yeah, because I mean, I never really thought she was a red herring because I kind of assumed from the beginning that she was, taking over Sydney's place. And I think most people probably would have gotten that. But it does open up a very, very slight possibility that the historical kind of desire from some fans for Sydney to actually end up being the killer in one of these, it was like almost like a real possibility. But for Sam, like, okay, like what if, it does take her over and she is the killer, and that's like kind of fulfilling that Sydney as the killer thing. But
Yeah, like here's your final girl. But, down the line, she could become a psychopath.
yeah,
Psychopathic killer, and she could be Ghostface herself. It could happen because she has these. She's connected. She's rooted to Billy Loomis. A psychopath.
I think down
And
the line,
Mrs. Loomis too. Don't forget about her grandma now.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
yeah. That is a great fucking point. She is related to that crazy bitch too.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say this though, like as interesting as that would have been, and potentially very cool, like kind of almost like a high tension type of deal. I don't know. It wouldn't have made sense for the legacy sequel part of the whole thing. But it does open up some interesting possibilities down the line. That is for sure. I think that Billy Loomis thing is okay because it actually does apply some type of significance to her relationship to him. But let's be honest, like most of the side characters and their legacy relations to other characters, like their ancestries to some of those other characters, aren't really like very meaningful at all or very significant at all because you got
like Randy's nephews. Like the most we saw is Randy's sister coming out of the room, so we could be like, that's Randy's sister. Those are Randy's sister's kids. You know what I mean? And then I don't know if you remember the dude that got stabbed in the neck in the bar parking lot. That's Stu's nephew.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's Stu's nephew.
Which barely fucking matters.
Yeah, his whole entire scene got cut from the movie. He had in the original script, he had a much bigger moment there, a much bigger scene. He even drove his car and his tire. I think he got a flat tire. He had to change it, and he got attacked by Ghostface that way or something. And anyways, so. Yeah, he was, but you wouldn't even know in the release version, or at least you hardly know unless you were really paying attention, obviously, like myself or you guys are, that he is Stu's nephew.
Yeah, it was just kind of disappointing. Well, first of all, because it's Kyle Gallner, and he's been in a bunch of horror movies, so I was expecting.
He's great. He's awesome.
He's great.
I wish he had a bigger role.
Exactly. Yeah, I wish he did too, but he just kind of fucking just.
I mean,
he was one of those possible red herring characters, and he was just offed so quickly.
Yeah,
I felt like him and Dylan Minnette were underused.
Yeah,
Judy's son.
Yeah.
I agree as well. Yeah.
Well, even Judy,
even his
herself,
scene was cut.
Yeah, even Judy herself to some degree, because technically she is not really. She's a sequel character, so I wouldn't really call her even a legacy character.
Not a legacy character.
So her death and her son's death were kind of whatever. But I mean, but I'm just saying, the side characters like Liv and Chad and all them, matter far less than any of the other guys, Sam in particular. So they were just more like Easter eggs. Although the characters themselves were fine. I mean, Mindy was probably my favorite side character. Just because she played that kind of Randy role, although a little bit differently.
I was so upset because my favorite character was Richie.
Oh,
Yeah, Richie
thought
was
he was-
great. I liked Richie,
he-
but I
I
did
thought
have a
he was
sneaking
hel-
suspicion that he was the killer.
He was hilarious, and I enjoyed him. And then all of a sudden, at the end, he just stabs Sam in the stomach, and then I'm like, dude, why? They couldn't pick someone else. It couldn't have been like fucking. I don't fucking know. It couldn't have been Liv and like what's her name? Liv and fucking Amber.
Yeah. I honestly thought it might have been Liv and Chad at first. I guess I'm not like totally disappointed in like who the killers were, but and I guess it. I was surprised that it was actually Amber. I guess because she was like
I saw that
not
one
in.
coming.
Well, I guess for me it was just that she wasn't in like a lot of the film compared to some of the other characters. So I just
Well,
she
you
was
know-
just off my radar. I guess
She
But
was-
I thought
yeah,
it
she
was
was-
Richie.
She was on my radar since the beginning. You know why?
She was suspicious.
I automatically. Didn't you guys automatically think, okay, there's gonna be like multiple ghost faces,
Well, yeah.
and then
Yeah.
at the beginning, Ghostface
was
is recording
texting?
Amber and saying like, if
Oh,
you
yeah.
don't fucking answer this question, I'm gonna stab this bitch.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden, she's opening her front door and Ghostface is attacking her. I'm like, oh, so Ghostface and her set up that footage prior to fucking trick her into like trying to run out and go help her just so she can get stabbed. Like, I immediately knew off the bat.
Could have
Amber
been,
was one
but
of
it could have been two killers, and one was at Amber's house, and one was at
Yeah,
Tara's house.
technically.
So
Yeah, but-
you know, it could have been just two other killers.
I mean, in
that's
Ru-
why I didn't, because I had that theory too, and I was like, well, it's kind of debunked that way. So I wasn't, I was like, maybe Amber's in on it, but Richie, his whole setup for his character, and I pretty much confirmed it in the scene that Dewey died, when he like was at the hospital before anybody else was there.
Mhm.
And he got on the elevator, and when he got on the elevator, he had this like worried look on his face, and it didn't look like he was worried for Dewey. It looked like he was
Yeah.
worried for Ghostface, and I was like, this
Yeah,
motherfucker
and-
is the killer. I know he's the killer.
And once Ghostface got
So-
shot in the hospital, they zoomed in on his face while he was laying on the floor, and he was like, he looked like he was concerned for Amber.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Instead
yeah,
of,
and
like, for
also,
anything
yeah,
else.
he wasn't even like, he could have gotten up and helped Dewey battle Ghostface too in that moment, and he was just like laying on the floor, like watching what happened. Like, police,
Yeah, see,
like,
at-
come on, Amber, come on, Amber.
At that moment, though, like they kind of had established that he was kind of like the funny pussy boyfriend. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
he was that's the role he chose to take on. He chose to pretend that he was like the pussy, because like at no point, like, he was just a fun, goofy boyfriend. Like.
Yeah.
The kind like
I mean, Jack
if you-
Quaid's great. I mean, I love him in The
Oh,
Boys.
I love him.
And that's why I knew I was going to love his character in this one. And his character was written really well. He was a fun character to follow. But another thing that gave up his, him being the killer to me was how is somebody going to never see a stab movie, right? On your way to Woodsboro. You've never even heard of,
Yeah. Sure.
that's based on a true story and stuff. You go to Woodsboro, and then all of a sudden, the very next night, you've seen all 8 of them.
Mm-hmm.
Every single, and you know them inside out. You've been watching YouTube videos.
Yeah.
Tell me.
Well, I just thought he was.
He knew it inside and out the next day, and I was like,
Yeah,
he's such a fucking liar. This sneaky,
Well,
conniving guy.
I mean, it kind of plays to the whole legacy sequel thing too, because he is the boyfriend. So, I mean, it's easier to think about it in retrospect, but I think if you're kind of approaching the movie thinking that might be the case, it would have actually been a great red herring to, make him not be a killer, but be the boyfriend, and have him kind of take over Billy's place, but like not be the killer. But it makes total sense that
They'll
that
do that in
he
this.
did take over Billy's place as the boyfriend and was the killer.
Yeah, it does. They'll do that in the sequel, though, because
You
in the
think so?
sequel, in Scream 2, Derek
Yeah.
was a bit of the red herring.
Yeah. Well, then
Yep.
you're allowed to flip it around. So yeah.
Khan was also a red herring in Scream 2, though. He was
Yeah.
more of a red herring. But
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah. But ultimately, I mean, I think Billy works to some degree, even though I don't know. Yeah, the visual aspect was a little off-putting at first, and personally, I don't know if he needed to be in it quite as much as he was. I thought that there were maybe like, I don't know, his exposure was a little excessive in my opinion, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think it was fine. Like I think if they had approached her whole psychosis in a more subtle way, it would have been maybe a little bit more interesting. But that's kind of nitpicky. I don't know.
I felt like the
I agree.
psychosis was stereotypical because not every delusion is like
Right, you see
a
shit.
yeah, like and like Hollywood loves doing the hallucination stuff. So I felt like that was kind of. I think it was just an excuse to bring back Skeet Ulrich and bring
definitely
another legacy character. I think that's all it was.
I think it was too. I mean, they wanted to bring back a lot of legacy characters this movie to really bring in those hardcore fans again.
Yeah,
that's what these requels all are about.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what they wanted to do, and they did it. And I think that to a certain degree it worked.
Yeah. Well, let's talk just real quick about some of the other elements, just the more technical stuff. I just wanted to say that, I mean, I think the directors did a fantastic job, and they approached it, I think, in a very similar way to like Ready or Not, which was another one of their films. And did they do Your Next? I think they did.
No,
but they did something similar.
I don't think, did they do? No, I
don't know if you noticed this. Speaking of technical aspects, do you like how they used cinematography and music as misdirection?
Yeah.
In making fun of jump scares, how every time Judy's son closed the door or turned around,
they did it like the camera 5 times.
That was good, yeah. Because that's also touching on other modern horror films like the big blockbusters, the supernatural paranormal stuff that does that shit all the time. And
I love that.
So while that stuff was few and far between, mostly kind of hidden away in those, camera tricks and whatnot, I still appreciated that they touched on that, just because, again, it's Scream, so you kind of have to talk about the state of horror in general, and you can only talk about slasher movies so much and slasher tropes and whatnot. So yeah, I appreciated that stuff. I thought really everything was done really well, and Wes probably would have been proud of it, in my opinion. And yeah, cinematography looked great. I mean, music was good. Makeup and everything like that was great. I mean, Ghostface themselves were a lot more brutal in this one. So, I mean, I thought all the practical effects and everything were fantastic. It was a very gory, Scream movie in comparison to all the other ones.
Yeah, they brought it back to its roots. What what the original was. The original, had, I think. I watched the behind the scenes. I'm pretty sure they said that the first one had around 60 gallons of blood. The second one had around 40 gallons of blood, and the third one only had around 20 or something. So they really they cut it by 20 gallons almost every single time. So I'm curious to know how much fake blood they used on this new one. I don't know exactly how much they used in the fourth either. I know there was a reason for that for the third film because of Columbine.
Right.
They really had to cut down on their gore and
only 20
stuff
gallons
around then.
This time, guys.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but I mean, it still makes sense because they're also poking at this kind of heightened aggression, in like Halloween and the other legacy sequels as well. Because if you're gonna have a sequel to the original, these days you gotta up the violence a bit, right, in order to actually make it mean anything. So. I liked it though. I mean, I think it worked really well, and considering their whole motive and angle and everything, I think it made a lot of sense that they would want to kind of one up it. So I appreciate all of that. I think from a technical aspect, it was a great film, and I mean, that's really kind of all I have to touch on it. Really quick, we wanted to talk about TCM, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the new one that just came out, and one thing in particular that I wanted to mention about that movie, which we'll give kind of our brief kind of opinion about it, I think. But when we were talking before about how the legacy characters were handled, one thing that I'm still kind of on the fence about, but leaning more toward disliking, was how they actually handled Sally Hardesty in the new Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And I'm curious to know what you guys think about it. But personally, I don't know, like. It's interesting because they kind of have balls for, spoiler alert, killing her off, but at the same time, it just doesn't hit nearly as hard as like Dewey's death in Scream, which is I wanted to make that connection earlier, but I didn't really want to get into TCM like completely. But I don't know. I thought that was kind of weak because she was only in the first film, right? You bring her in and okay, she's supposed to do the kind of Laurie Strode thing where she's like this older badass who like goes after Leatherface. And then you just kill her off, which to some degree, like, okay, that's new, I guess, because you're not going the Laurie Strode route. But again, like she also just has far less significance in the franchise than Laurie does. So it's like you kill her off and it's like, then what the fuck was she there for in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, I think I said to you outside of this conversation that Sally's character isn't really like your. It's not the character that it's not the final girl that you think of. When you think of final girls, she's not really a final girl that you really think of very often. Like, yeah, she's the survivor in the first movie, the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie, but that's really all she's known as is the survivor. She's not even really known as the final girl. Like, yeah, she technically is a final girl, but she never showed up in any of the sequels. She never had any connection to any sequel. Mm-hmm. So her legacy just isn't really there. So like even bringing her back, like it's cool, but at the same time, it's not nearly as cool as bringing a character like Laurie Strode back or Sidney Prescott or even a character like, whatever Jennifer Loves Hewitt was for I Know What You Did Last Summer. Like people would probably like that more than bringing Sally Hardesty back. Shit,
even Nancy,
whatever her name is.
Yeah, even Nancy.
Nancy would be big. Yeah,
and New Nightmare was like a big one. And if they had killed her off in that movie, that would have been pretty fucking crazy and impactful for that movie, for that franchise, because even though she was like in the first movie, I don't know, I just feel like she was really like the final girl of that movie, and she actually matters a lot more than like Sally does. And
oh, absolutely. I mean, she's in the third movie too.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And so she has more, I guess, more under her belt in that franchise than a character like Sally does in Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Yeah. So, the connection is there, but it's just weak. And then also the way that her character was handled, to dive into that was also very, very weak, in my opinion. It's harder to like.
I don't really think you achieve that in the way that you wanted to achieve it.
Yeah. Well, the problem is that the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was trying to be something that it's not. Mm-hmm. I agree. That series is not a final girl series.
Right.
It doesn't have carryover because Leatherface doesn't chase people down. Mm-hmm. Leatherface is Leatherface, and he stays there. He stays in Texas, and he attacks the people that come into his land and into his property or wherever he's at. That's what his character is, and that's what that series is built around. Leatherface doesn't go to Manhattan,
No,
that doesn't happen.
Although that would be interesting.
So it's a little bit different than any other franchise, than any other horror franchise out there. So that character, so this movie trying to build, passing of the torch or representing a new final girl. There is no final girl. So the survivor in this movie, she's not like if she comes back, that'll be stupid. Why is she going back to Texas to be attacked by Leatherface again?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah.
Like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go back to kill him. They just did that with Sally, and that was stupid. So let's not do that. It's just gonna be another circle. Like,
I don't get it because sorry, Sam, but I just wanted to say real quick that I don't get why they would set up him going back to the house if they did what they did with I don't even remember her fucking name at this point. I'm too lazy to open up my phone and check it out. But was it Lily or something stupid like that? The the last girl.
Yeah.
It's like that just didn't make sense. But I'm sorry, Sam. Go ahead.
I don't know. I feel like the only legacy character we brought back was Leatherface because like Sally was so like insignificant. She wasn't even a final girl. She didn't really fight back. I mean, Leatherface's brother got hit by a semi truck, and then the only person that hurt Leatherface in the original was the trucker that hit him with a wrench, and Leatherface cut his own fucking leg. I feel like Sally just lucked out that she got that ride from that pickup truck because like she was literally tied up in a chair getting like fucking mentally and physically abused, and then like she got away. She got sliced up by Leatherface's brother with the fucking razor blade. He sliced her back like 10 times before he got hit by a semi truck, and then she just happened to find a ride and lucked out. Like she wasn't final girl material. I mean, like she like the whole final girl thingy is about like fighting back against adversity, and then like taking this weapon that is usually the killer's weapon, meaning his manhood, because weapons are like apparently supposed to represent phallic objects, so like by killing the killer, or at least attacking him with like a weapon, you're like taking his manhood, something along those lines. But she did not attempt like any of that. Like she just basically got her ass beat, got kidnapped, and then she ran away. And then for them to try to turn her into this badass, like I think if you watch the original, it is an epic foreshadowing of how her fate would end in this one. If she wouldn't run away, she wouldn't get away, because she did not put up a fight. And you could tell like that she wasn't really a fighter that much. When she pulled up on him and he was sitting in his bed, she pointed the shotgun right at his head, said, "Do you remember me? I'm the one that got away." And he's just like fucking Thanos.
Why do I care?
I don't even know who you are. Like he just fucking walked away. And at that point I'm like, oh, she's gonna kick the bucket very soon, because like she was so irrelevant, and like
yeah, and her character was still weak. She had no adversity. She, like you said, she's like, she just survived the events, and she got lucky to survive the events. She was not final girl material. She had no, like, she had that connection to him. And, it was weird because the writing for her character made it seem like she was this, this person who had grown into this sheriff and this sweet badass, that was going to come in like to town and just shred Leatherface, because that's what she was focused on, like Laurie Strode in Halloween. But that's not what she was, because she hadn't faced that adversity. And then when she got there, you knew that. And it was the writing was weird, because it was kind of like up here for her in the first place, and then it like made her really weak when she saw Leatherface, and like, so that didn't really make sense from that standpoint. But yeah, I mean, her character in the first place was a weak character.
True, yeah. She really needs to be in like at least one other TCM movie for any of that to like mean anything. And then, I mean, at least her death would have been a little bit more impactful, but the fact that she just went from that in the first film to this and then just fucking died right away is like so random. Like, I don't know. I didn't like that part. And then the whole turning Leatherface into some kind of like supernatural deity or whatever who just gets shotgun blasted and then comes back, I guess is a fun way to like address, a slasher movie trope, but it also doesn't make any sense in the TCM franchise, because that's just not something that has like existed within the bounds of the film. So
no, it literally never did.
No, that whole last act was just strange to me.
I mean, and him like breaking someone's arm so hard that they had a fucking compound fracture and then stabbing them with it. Look, I don't like, I'm not being ableist. Listen, Bubba was not some sort of supernatural thing. He was a man with a moderate intellectual disorder. Not gonna say the R word, even though, but like that's what Leatherface was. He had a moderate to severe intellectual disorder. I would even go as far as to say profound, because he didn't talk.
Yeah.
But he was just this man with an intellectual disorder and this crazy family. So how the fuck did he end up how did no one notice him? They're like, Sally's been looking for him for years, and then she just drove 5 miles and found him.
Yeah.
You didn't find this big gorilla, goofy, stupid motherfucker at this fucking orphanage. Also, he was like 40 years, like he was like 30 years old at the time of Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah, he would have been like
1974.
old as fuck. He would have been
He's like
senile
70.
now.
What
70
the fuck
in
was he
this
going
movie or
to an
something.
orphanage for? Why did he get adopted? Like, who's like, if anything, he would have got sent to a fucking group home or something. Like,
Yeah.
why? Like, I don't understand. Like, why is this woman who he doesn't like, this random stranger taking care of him,
I know.
and why did he take her face? On top
I don't
of it,
know.
like, there's a lot of weird shit. Like,
Look-
don't
Yeah,
get me
right.
wrong.
If he didn't even remember, and then he's like, you know,
Yeah. Look,
yeah, your face, that's mine now.
Look, no offense to any Texans that are listening in, but we know that all of you, all y'all 70 to 80-year-old, like big, like above 6'4" Texans are not that agile or immortal.
Or like freaky, yeah,
freaky strong and
strength
invulnerable.
and-
So nothing that like Leatherface did in this movie was even like remotely believable. Not to say like it has to be because it's a movie ultimately, but like the first movie is so that you're a legacy sequel to is so grounded in reality to some extent.
Well,
to some
yeah, and
extent,
that was the
but-
biggest problem with this movie. I mean, we've been touching on it this whole time, but the fact that it tried to be something that it's just not.
Mhm.
It did that with all of its characters. It did it with its story. It especially did it with Leatherface and Sally, obviously. But with Leatherface, you know, making him supernatural. He's never been that way before. He's never had that supernatural strength.
Mhm.
So why, like, just because you're making this movie for a new generation doesn't mean that you have to copy, like, Halloween
Mhm.
and these classic franchises, because those movies have been doing that this entire time.
Yeah.
That Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Leatherface, has not been doing that this entire time.
No.
So why all of a sudden are we going to decide to give him supernatural, you know, freaky strength and be able to snap people's arms
Yeah,
and stab
doesn't
them with
make
their
any sense.
bones with one hand?
Right. Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense.
It's, you know, it was off-putting. It was off-putting for his character, and it took me out of the movie a bit.
Yeah.
You know, you still had some fun kills and stuff inside of there. Like, I can't rip on it 100%, but it is, you know, it just wasn't good.
No,
it wasn't good.
The 2022 TCM was mindlessly entertaining, and like I still like, you know, ultimately had some enjoyment watching it. Like it was you know, somewhat entertaining, but it was definitely a movie that was following this requel legacy sequel trend like to a fault, and like just trying really to generate some of that nostalgia and like assume that fans are going to forgive its faults because of that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why they thought that would work, but they did, and so that's really what the movie was. And I mean, yeah, if you're looking for something that's like mindlessly fun, I guess check it out, because there are some cool kills, and sure, there's some gore and stuff like that, you know, is okay. But I mean,
Yeah, and it's
other than
really
that, I
short
don't
too.
know.
I'm pretty
It is
sure
short.
it's it's
like an hour
it's like
22 or
inside.
something.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's under an hour 30. So
Yeah. But I mean, I don't know. Other than that, I think there are a lot of things in it that just don't work and just don't make sense at all. But hey, it is what it is. That movie also suffered like some issues, because I did write about it a little bit, and you know, they initially had some stuff shot with a pair of directors that the studio didn't like, and then you know, I think Fede Alvarez was attached to it the whole time, but then he got a new director on, they had to reshoot it and everything. But I don't know, hey, Fede Alvarez did a fantastic remake. I don't know why he didn't have maybe more creative input to say, hey, maybe you shouldn't fucking do this or that, but it is what it is. And hopefully we see less of these legacy sequels following the trend of TCM. And like I said, I know that Scream is kind of its own thing because it operates a little bit differently, being like a commentary. But even as a legacy sequel, like we've been talking about this entire time, works in my opinion, better than like TCM does. Like, it doesn't just do nostalgia for nostalgia's sake. Like, there is actually some meaning behind, it going back to Stu's house in the final act, and even those little homages and Easter eggs to other things in like the first movie. So I think TCM doesn't do that as well. But yeah, that's it. So we are running pretty close to 2 hours here on the recording, and we're running a bit over time. But anything else that either of you two want to say about Scream or TCM or Legacy sequels or whatever before we get back to the Beyond?
Yep, I have exactly what I want to say. We need more Legacy sequels like Scream, and less Legacy sequels like Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah, definitely agree there. And I guess one final thing to touch on: Scream paid such great respects to Wes in many different ways, and I really love it for that. Not, obviously I love it for other reasons, but the movie really did a wonderful job of paying respects to Wes. And I'm pretty sure actually the last episode that I was on, we talked just about Wes Craven's movies. Pretty sure that was our topic. It wasn't just Scream. I think it was just Wes Craven's movies in general.
I think so,
and thank you. Thank you to the directors here. Every creative behind, getting this movie made and involved in making the movie. So, yeah, I really enjoyed it. Obviously, we talked about it at length, but no, I just wanted to say that they did a really wonderful job there. And yeah, to wrap it up, definitely I agree with Sam. Make more Legacy sequels like Scream. Obviously they don't have to have commentary, but make more Legacy sequels like Scream and less like Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah. Well, there you go. And, they've already announced that they're making a Scream 6. So I'm excited to see what goes on in that one. That'll be interesting. And in however many years they make it, I mean, things could change. You never know. There are trends going on pretty much all the time.
They're bringing back other characters.
Genre. Yep.
Kirby, let's go.
I was really hoping that she would be back, but that's a whole other discussion. So
there was actually I think when she was an Easter egg, and then there was another Easter egg. So while I think it was Richie, he was browsing YouTube, like there were like interview with the survivor, and it was an interview with Kirby.
Yes,
that was she survived, and then there was a whole thing like, is Stu Macher still alive? ? And I think that one was more of like a little fan service, because if you're on the Woodsboro Horror Film Club and like the Scream fan clubs and groups on Facebook, they're all
theories everywhere.
They're all having like this shit conversation. I literally meant that, a shit conversation where they're like, Stu is still alive, and like they got all this proof and stuff, and it's like,
Stu's behind the murders. That's what a lot of people are saying.
I know the conspiracy theory is fun, but I definitely don't believe that. But I would be interested to see Kirby come back, and maybe some of the other characters as well. But we'll just have to see once Scream 6 comes out, and you guys can bet that once there is more information about that film, we'll be covering it, and hopefully we'll be back pretty soon. We're not really on like a crazy tight schedule or anything like we have been before, so we apologize for the delays in getting episodes out and everything. I recently moved, and I started doing some other work and stuff, and I know Sam's busy. The Caretaker's got a lot of stuff going on as well, so it's been a little bit more difficult to get episodes of Grave Discussions out there, but we are still trying, and we'll knock them out as much as we can. And until the next one, hopefully we'd like to get some more stuff, some more content out on the website, and maybe something else. Who knows? So just as always, keep an eye out on our social media. Sam, where can they find us?
They can find us on Stitcher, on Spotify, and they can also find us on Apple Podcasts, can't they?
Yes, they can.
But most importantly, you can find us at http://gravediscussions.net. On Grave Discussion in 2022.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me.